Grief already shattered my world when my only son passed away. I thought nothing could hurt more until betrayal came knocking from the person I least expected. My grandson Ethan showed up at my door with tears in his eyes, asking to stay with me. I thought it was grief bringing us closer. But behind those tears hid a plan I could have never imagined. Soon, I discovered whispers, hidden conversations, and then legal papers. Ethan wasn't just staying for comfort. He was trying to take everything my son had worked for, a $4 million estate. He thought I wouldn't fight back, that age and grief would make me weak. But he underestimated me. One recording, one careless brag, flipped the entire battle upside down. What started as heartbreak turned into a war for justice, and in the end, the truth didn't just protect the estate, it exposed everything Ethan tried to hide. My name is Margaret, and if you had told me a year ago that I'd be sitting in an empty house, clutching a folded flag and staring at a picture of my only son, I would have never believed you. Losing a child, no matter their age, is something no parent should ever have to endure. He wasn't just my son. He was my anchor, my confidant, and the reason I still believed in tomorrow. His sudden passing left a silence so loud that it threatened to swallow me whole. The funeral was a blur. Faces, handshakes, tears, and endless murmurs of, "I'm so sorry." But when the flowers wilted and everyone went home, I was left with the crushing reality. My boy was gone. I had only one family tie left, my grandson, Ethan. He was barely 20, with my son's same stubborn chin and fiery spirit. But he carried a kind of restlessness that worried me. It was just a week after the funeral when Ethan showed up at my doorstep. His eyes were red, and his voice carried both grief and desperation. "Grandma," he said softly, "can I stay here for a while? I can't be at Dad's house right now. Everything reminds me of him." I saw the pain in his face, and without hesitation I opened my arms. I thought it was just grief speaking, but there was something else, something I couldn't name then. I didn't know yet that his request wasn't only about comfort. Behind his tears and trembling voice hid a truth that would soon rock the fragile foundation of my life. Because while he asked for shelter, what he really wanted was control. Control over the very thing my son had left behind. A $4 million estate. And the first clue came far sooner than I expected. Having Ethan in the house brought a strange mix of comfort and unease. His presence filled the empty hallways with a voice I hadn't heard since his father was alive. Sometimes, when he laughed in the kitchen, I swore I heard my son again. Yet, at the same time, there was a restlessness in Ethan, a jittery energy that never let him sit still for long. He was polite, at least on the surface. He carried my groceries in, helped mow the lawn, and even joined me for tea in the mornings. But his phone was always in his hand, his fingers flying across the screen, his eyes darting as if he were waiting for something. Once, I caught him staring at the framed picture of his father and me on the mantel. His jaw tightened, his lips pressed together, and then he quickly looked away. "Grandma," he asked one night, Did he ever tell you what he wanted done with everything? You know, the house, the money?" The question jolted me. I'd expected grief, maybe questions about his childhood or his father's last days. But estate matters? Barely 2 weeks had passed. My son's will was clear. His assets, worth nearly $4 million, were divided between Ethan and me. But I hadn't expected Ethan to bring it up so soon, I answered carefully. "Your father wanted both of us taken care of. He trusted us to honor his memory together." Ethan nodded, but the look in his eyes unsettled me. It wasn't sadness. It was calculation. That was the first night I realized. This wasn't only about grief. Something bigger and far more dangerous was brewing beneath my grandson's sorrow. A week later, I woke up to the sound of muffled voices. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then I realized Ethan was on the phone at 2 a.m. His voice was low, sharp, and nothing like the broken boy who had asked me for shelter. "No, she doesn't suspect anything," I heard him say. "But I need that paperwork fast. If the estate gets tied up in court, it could take months." My chest tightened. Who was he talking to? Why was he rushing about paperwork? I stayed quiet, standing in the hallway, heart pounding. After a pause, I heard him chuckle. Relax, she's old. She won't fight me on this. By the time she realizes, everything will already be signed. Those words cut deeper than a knife. Was this really my grandson? The boy my son had loved more than anything? I tiptoed back to my room, my hands trembling. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. I wanted to confront him, demand answers, but my instincts screamed, wait, watch, gather proof. That's when I decided I wouldn't just be a grieving grandmother. I would protect my son's legacy, even if it meant protecting it from his own child. The next morning, I watched Ethan carefully. He was cheerful, almost too cheerful, making pancakes in the kitchen like nothing had happened. He hummed a tune, asked if I wanted strawberries, and smiled as though the midnight conversation had never occurred. But now that I knew, I saw things differently. When he offered to help me sort through my son's files, I noticed his eyes scanning for bank statements. When he sat at the dining table with his laptop, I caught glimpses of emails addressed to lawyers. Then came the real red flag. A letter arrived in the mail, addressed to me, but intercepted by Ethan before I could grab it. He waved it casually and said, "Oh, just boring estate stuff. I'll handle it for you." He slipped it into his backpack before I could ask questions. That was the moment I stopped pretending. My grandson wasn't just grieving, he was planning. He wanted control of my son's estate, and he wasn't going to stop until he had it. But what Ethan didn't know was that I had a strength he underestimated. Grief had nearly broken me, yes, but it had also sharpened me. He thought I was weak. He thought I was blind. He was about to learn that I was neither. I knew I couldn't confront Ethan directly. Not yet. He was young, impulsive, and desperate. If I pushed too hard, he'd just find another way to take what he wanted. So I started quietly preparing. First, I called my lawyer, a trusted family friend who had guided me and my son for years. "Don't tell anyone," I whispered over the phone. "Especially not Ethan. Something's happening, and I need your help." My lawyer confirmed my suspicions. There had been unusual inquiries into the estate. Someone, likely Ethan, had been requesting information and even attempting to push through changes without my consent. Thankfully, the safeguards my son had put in place required my approval for any transfer. That was my shield for now. At home, I kept up the act. I let Ethan think I was still the grieving, clueless grandmother. I even let him help me with papers, though I quietly copied everything he touched. I started a folder of evidence, emails, phone logs, even recordings of his late-night calls. It broke my heart. Every time I looked at him, I saw my son's eyes. But behind them was greed, not love. I prayed I was wrong, but deep down, I knew the truth. My grandson wanted to cut me out completely. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table, Ethan finally dropped his mask. He didn't even wait until dessert. "Grandma," he said bluntly, "don't you think it would be easier if I just managed everything? You don't need the stress. Well, you should just relax and let me handle it." I set my fork down slowly, my pulse quickening. "Handle what, Ethan?" He leaned forward, his tone sharp. "The estate. The money. Dad wanted me to build something with it. You don't need it. You have this house, your retirement. I'm young. I can make it grow." There it was. The mask was gone. He wasn't asking. He was declaring. I looked him in the eye and smiled faintly. "Your father wanted both of us taken care of. That's what his will says." Ethan's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing. For the first time, I saw something chilling in his expression, entitlement mixed with fury. That night, I knew. This wasn't going to end with polite conversations. A storm was coming, and I had to be ready to weather it. The turning point came unexpectedly. One afternoon, while cleaning the guest room Ethan used, I stumbled upon his phone left charging on the desk. I wasn't looking to snoop, but a notification flashed across the screen. Video uploaded successfully. Curious, I opened it. What I saw made my blood run cold. Ethan had recorded a video of himself standing in front of my son's house, declaring that the entire $4 million estate was rightfully his. He spoke about me like I was an obstacle, an old woman standing in the way of his future. He talked about transferring everything into his name as if it were already decided. And worse, he had shared it online. That video wasn't just arrogance, it was evidence. Evidence of his intentions, his greed, and his willingness to erase me from my own son's legacy. As I stood there, staring at the glowing screen, one thing became clear. Ethan thought he was playing chess, moving pieces carefully. But what he didn't realize was that I had just been handed the checkmate. The morning after I found Ethan's video, I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee going cold. My hands shook as I replayed his words in my mind. Rightfully mine. She doesn't matter. I'll make the transfers soon. It was one thing to suspect his intentions. It was another to see them spoken aloud for the world. I wanted to confront him immediately, but my instincts told me to wait. If I accused him without evidence, he would simply deny it and become more secretive. So I carried on like nothing had changed. I buttered toast for him in the morning, smiled when he told me he'd be out with friends, and pretended to be the clueless grandmother he thought I was. But inside, my doubt grew heavier by the hour. Had I failed my son? Had I somehow failed to guide Ethan into becoming a man of integrity? My son had worked his whole life to build that estate, not for greed, but for security, for family. To hear Ethan twisted into entitlement made me sick. That day, I called my lawyer again. I have evidence now, I whispered. A video. He's planning to take it all, my lawyer sighed. We need to be cautious, Margaret. If this goes to court, it won't just be legal, it'll be public. Are you ready for that? Ready? No, but determined? Absolutely. For the first time since my son's death, I felt a flicker of strength return. Ethan thought he was playing a game of inheritance. But to me, it was about legacy, my son's legacy. And I would not let it be destroyed. A few nights later, Ethan came home later than usual. His eyes were glassy, and I could smell alcohol on his breath. He slumped into the chair opposite me and started rambling. You know, Grandma, he slurred, people already think I'm the rightful heir. Dad told me once that he wanted me to carry the family name forward. Everyone knows you're temporary. The words hit me like a slap. Temporary? That's how he saw me. Not as his grandmother, not as family, but as an obstacle waiting to die. I stayed calm. Ethan, your father wanted us to share this, to honor him together. He laughed bitterly. Honor? That money is wasted sitting in your hands. I could invest it, flip properties, start businesses. You'll just sit here in this old house until the end. He didn't realize I was recording him under the table, my phone capturing every word. My hands shook, but my resolve hardened. Ethan wasn't just greedy, he was reckless, and that recklessness would be his undoing. The next day, while Ethan was out, I decided to search his room. I hated the idea, it felt invasive, but I had to know what he was planning. I opened drawers, checked under the mattress, and finally found a folder tucked at the back of his closet. Inside were copies of estate documents, some with forged signatures. My heart pounded as I flipped through them. He had been trying to recreate my signature. Sloppy but disturbingly close. One paper in particular chilled me, a draft transfer of ownership document, with my name typed neatly at the bottom, as though I had agreed to hand over full control of the estate. I sank onto the bed, clutching the papers. My grandson, my flesh and blood, was willing to commit fraud to steal from me. I took pictures of everything and put the papers back exactly as I found them. That night, when Ethan smiled at me over dinner, I forced myself to smile back. But inside, my heart was breaking. My son's death had already shattered me, but now I was losing the grandson I thought I had. The following morning, I brought the new evidence to my lawyer. He frowned as he examined the photos. This is serious, Margaret. If he tries to use these forged papers, he could face criminal charges. But we need to be smart. If you confront him now, he may destroy the evidence or turn it against you. I nodded, my throat tight. So what do I do? Keep documenting. Don't let him know you're onto him. And Margaret, be careful. People who get desperate over money can be unpredictable. He may not mean to hurt you, but desperation has a way of twisting people. His words chilled me. Hurt me? I hadn't even considered the possibility. Ethan wasn't just after the estate, he was consumed by it. And if I stood in his way, what would he be capable of? I walked home that day slower than usual, my body weighed down by grief and fear. But there was also fire in me now. I wasn't just protecting myself, I was protecting the legacy my son left behind. And I would see it through, no matter the cost. One evening, two men I didn't recognize came to the house. They were young, dressed casually, but their demeanor was unsettling. "Is Ethan here?" one asked, leaning on the doorframe like he owned the place. I frowned. "No, he's out. Can I ask who's calling?" They exchanged a look and smirked. "Just tell him we're waiting on his investment. He'll know what that means." My stomach dropped. Investments? Debt? What had Ethan gotten himself into? After they left, I sat in silence, piecing it together. Ethan wasn't just greedy, he was in trouble. The estate wasn't just a windfall for him, it was his escape plan. He wasn't trying to honor his father or build a future. He was trying to cover his tracks. When Ethan returned that night, carefree and smiling, I felt a surge of anger. "Who were those men, Ethan?" I asked casually. His face darkened instantly. "Don't worry about it," he snapped. "They're just friends, but I knew better." And now, the stakes were higher than ever. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by my son's photo, tears streaming down my face. "What would you want me to do?" I whispered. I knew the answer. My son had built everything with hard work and integrity. He would never want it squandered on gambling, debts, or shady dealings. And he would never want me pushed aside by his own child. So I made a silent promise. I would fight. Not just for me, but for my son's memory. I would gather every piece of evidence, expose every lie, and protect what he had left behind. Ethan thought I was weak. He thought I would crumble under pressure, but he had forgotten. I had already survived the worst pain imaginable, burying my child. Compared to that, nothing could break me. The following week, Ethan grew bolder. He started leaving his papers out in the open, making calls in the living room, even bragging about big plans he couldn't share yet. He believed I was too naive to understand. I played along, even offering him cookies while he whispered to lawyers on the phone. But behind my calm exterior, I was documenting everything. Recordings, photos, written notes, my folder grew thicker every day. It was only a matter of time before Ethan made his move. And when he did, I would be ready. The storm hadn't hit yet, but I could feel the air thickening, heavy with tension. I was no longer just a grieving grandmother. I was a woman preparing for battle, and Ethan had no idea that his downfall had already begun. When I met my lawyer again, I brought the thick folder of evidence I'd collected, videos, recordings, copies of documents, and notes on Ethan's strange visitors. He spread the papers across his desk, his expression darkening with each page. "Margaret," he said finally, "you've built a strong case. But this can't just be about defense anymore. We need to prepare a strategy, one that not only protects your share of the estate, but also exposes what Ethan has been doing." I nodded, though my heart sank. Exposing Ethan meant dragging him into court, tarnishing his name publicly. Could I really do that to my grandson? My lawyer leaned forward. "Listen, if he succeeds, you'll lose everything your son wanted you to have. And worse, he'll burn through it all, leaving nothing of the legacy behind. Is that what your son would want?" I felt my throat tighten. My son had built his fortune with sweat and sacrifice. The idea of it vanishing into Ethan's reckless hands made my stomach churn. So, we made a plan. My lawyer would quietly place safeguards on the estate accounts, preventing any unauthorized transfers. We'd also begin preparing a counter-petition in case Ethan filed for control. As I left his office, my steps felt heavier, but more determined. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was fighting. Ethan thought he was orchestrating a master plan, but without knowing it, I had just put a shield in place. And when the time came, I would wield that shield as a sword. Back at home, Ethan grew more distant. His cheerful facade slipped, replaced by curt answers and long hours locked in his room. I tried to reach him. "Ethan, are you okay? You've been so quiet." He barely glanced up. "I'm fine, just busy. Don't worry about it." But I worried. His phone calls grew more heated. I overheard fragments. "No, she doesn't know. I'll handle it. Just a few more days." Then came the chilling moment. One evening, I brought him tea, only to hear him mutter under his breath, "She won't even know what hit her." I froze at the doorway. He didn't see me. He thought I was weak, blind, and oblivious. But in that moment, I saw him for what he was. Not just a grieving grandson, but a man consumed by greed. The Ethan I'd known, The boy who used to sit on my porch eating ice cream with sticky fingers felt like a stranger. And that realization hurt more than I could bear. Determined to protect myself, I doubled down on gathering evidence. I set up a small camera in the living room, hidden among the books on the shelf. I didn't like invading his privacy, but something told me it was necessary. It didn't take long to pay off. A few nights later, Ethan sat in the living room with a friend. "She has no clue," he boasted, waving a stack of papers. "Once these go through, the estate's mine. She won't be able to touch a dime." His friend laughed nervously. "Are you sure this is legal?" Ethan smirked. "Legal enough? By the time anyone figures it out, I'll already be in control." I watched the footage later, my heart pounding. There it was, proof not just of his intentions, but of his arrogance. It was painful to see him speak about me that way, but it strengthened my resolve. If Ethan wanted a war, I was prepared to fight on the battlefield he least expected: the law. Despite the storm brewing inside me, I kept my mask on. At breakfast, I asked Ethan about his plans for the weekend. I listened as he talked about meeting investors with pride. I nodded, smiled, even wished him luck. But beneath the surface, I was documenting everything. Every slip of the tongue, every careless boast, every shady visitor, I wrote it all down. The hardest part was acting like I didn't know. When Ethan offered to help me sign estate documents, I smiled sweetly and said I'd look at them later. When he tried to rush me, I simply laughed it off, pretending to be forgetful. He thought he was manipulating me. But in truth, I was letting him dig his own grave, one careless action at a time. The turning point came during a small gathering Ethan hosted. He invited a few friends over, and though I stayed in my room, their voices carried easily through the walls. One friend raised a toast, to Ethan, the new man of the estate. Laughter erupted, and Ethan added smugly, "She doesn't even know she's about to hand it all over." "I'll be sitting on 4 million soon, boys." I stood frozen in the hallway, my phone recording every word. His arrogance was staggering, but it was also the rope he was hanging himself with. Later, when the guests had gone, Ethan swaggered through the house as if he already owned it. I watched him quietly, clutching the recording in my hand. He had no idea that his own words would soon be the weapon that turned everything against him. As I gathered more evidence, I stumbled across something that broke me. Hidden in Ethan's drawer was a crumpled photo, one of him and my son, taken years ago at a baseball game. On the back, Ethan had scribbled, "One day, it'll all be mine." He promised. I sank into the chair, tears blurring my vision. My son had loved Ethan deeply, perhaps too blindly. Maybe in some moment of encouragement he had told Ethan, "Someday this will be yours." And Ethan had clung to those words, twisting them into justification for his greed. I pressed the photo to my chest and wept. I wasn't just fighting for money, I was fighting for the truth. My son hadn't built his legacy to be squandered. He had built it for family, for security, for love, and I would make sure that truth saw the light. By now, the evidence was overwhelming. I had recordings, documents, videos, enough to show Ethan's intentions clearly. My lawyer and I prepared the counterpetition, setting everything in motion. But as I sat in my quiet living room that evening, watching Ethan laugh on the phone, a strange calm washed over me. The storm was coming. The battle lines were drawn. Ethan believed he was days away from victory. He thought I was fragile, unaware, and defeated. But in reality, I was ready to face him in court, ready to protect my son's legacy, ready to show him that his grandmother was not the weak woman he thought she was. The next move was his, and when he made it, I would be waiting. The day finally came. A thick envelope arrived by courier, stamped with the county court seal. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were pages upon pages of legal documents. Ethan had officially filed a petition to gain control over the estate. His words leapt off the page like daggers. Margaret is no longer capable of managing finances. For the good of the family's assets, I, Ethan, as the rightful heir, should be granted authority. I sank into my chair, the letter clutched in my hands. The audacity! He wasn't just trying to take control quietly anymore. He was dragging me into court, painting me as incapable. Later that evening, I confronted him gently. "Ethan, I received the papers today." He didn't flinch. In fact, he smirked. "Good. It's for the best, Grandma. You've had your time. Now it's mine." The arrogance in his voice nearly broke me, but I held back tears. Instead, I whispered, "We'll see." Behind me, the walls of the house felt heavier, as though they too carried the weight of betrayal. But I was not walking into that courtroom unprepared. No. Ethan had just lit the match that would ignite his own downfall. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and polished floors. As I walked in, clutching my lawyer's arm for support, I felt the stares. Ethan sat across the aisle, dressed sharply, his expression smug. His lawyer leaned toward him, whispering instructions. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Ethan's lawyer was the first to speak. He painted a picture of me as a frail old woman, overwhelmed by grief, incapable of handling complex finances. I wanted to scream, to defend myself. But my lawyer squeezed my hand, whispering, "Patience. Let them talk, then it was our turn." My lawyer stood tall and firm. "Your Honor, we have evidence to show that Ethan's intentions are not rooted in care or concern for his grandmother, but in greed." He motioned for the first exhibit, a recording of Ethan at his party, bragging about taking the estate. The judge's eyebrows rose. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. For the first time, the smugness on his face flickered. That day was only the beginning, but already, the cracks in his carefully constructed image had begun to show. News of the lawsuit spread quickly through the family. Cousins, uncles, and even distant relatives began calling. Some offered support, shocked by Ethan's betrayal. Others, however, whispered that maybe Ethan was right, that perhaps I should step aside. It hurt deeply. Family dinners, once filled with warmth and laughter, now seemed like battlegrounds of opinion. My niece visited one afternoon and said softly, "Aunt Margaret, maybe it's easier to just let him have it." "You've lived your life." Her words stung like a slap. "I've lived my life? Did that mean my worth ended once I grew older?" I stared at her with quiet strength. "No, my life isn't over, and my son's legacy isn't a prize for Ethan to waste. If I don't fight, what message does that send?" She lowered her gaze, ashamed. That was the moment I realized this battle wasn't just about me or the estate. It was about dignity, about proving that age and grief didn't erase my right to fight for what was mine. The second day in court was explosive. Ethan's lawyer presented a stack of documents, claiming they showed my inability to handle finances. But my lawyer calmly walked up, holding a different set of papers. "Your Honor," he said, "these documents were forged." Gasps filled the courtroom as he handed them to the judge. The signatures didn't match, the dates were inconsistent, and most damning of all, the notary's seal was proven fake. Ethan's lawyer stuttered, fumbling for an explanation. Ethan's face turned pale, his confidence slipping. Then came the real blow. We played the hidden camera footage of Ethan bragging to his friend about taking everything. The courtroom was silent, except for Ethan's own arrogant voice filling the air. When the video ended, the judge fixed Ethan with a hard stare. "This does not reflect concern for your grandmother. It reflects greed." I sat quietly, hands folded, heart pounding. For the first time, I saw fear in Ethan's eyes. Despite the evidence, Ethan didn't back down. That night at home, he confronted me. "Why are you doing this to me? You're ruining my future." I looked at him, tears welling. "Ethan, you did this to yourself. All I ever wanted was to love you, to guide you, but you've chosen greed over family." For a moment, I saw a flicker of the boy I once knew. The boy who held my hand at his father's funeral, who cried into my shoulder. But then his face hardened. "You'll regret this," he hissed before storming out. I sat alone, the silence pressing in. I had gained ground in court, but at what cost? The grandson I loved was slipping further and further away, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever get him back. The next court session brought an unexpected twist. Just as the judge was preparing to hear closing arguments, the doors opened, and in walked one of Ethan's so-called friends, the same man I'd seen in the recordings. To my shock, he stepped forward and said, "Your Honor, I need to speak. I can't be part of this anymore." He testified that Ethan had not only plotted to take the estate, but had also promised to cut his friends in on the money once he gained control. His testimony aligned perfectly with the video evidence, sealing Ethan's fate. Ethan's lawyer objected furiously, but the damage was done. The judge allowed the testimony, and the scales of justice tipped firmly in my favor. Ethan sat frozen, his face drained of color. For the first time, he looked small, not powerful, not in control, but small. At the end of that day's hearing, the judge looked directly at Ethan. His voice was stern, measured, and heavy with authority. "Young man, I've seen many cases of greed in my years, but rarely do I see such blatant disregard for family. You are fortunate your grandmother has chosen to handle this with dignity. If this continues, the court will not hesitate to impose serious consequences." Ethan swallowed hard, his bravado crumbling in front of everyone. As I left the courtroom, my lawyer whispered, "We're winning, Margaret. Just one more push," but inside my heart was heavy. Yes, I was close to securing the estate, but the victory came with sorrow. I was watching my grandson unravel before my eyes. The courtroom was silent that morning, as though the very walls were holding their breath. I sat with my lawyer, hands clasped tightly in my lap, while Ethan slouched on the other side, his eyes downcast. Weeks of arguments, evidence, and testimony had brought us here. The air was thick with tension, each tick of the clock echoing like thunder. The judge shuffled his papers before speaking. After reviewing the evidence presented, this court finds that Margaret is fully capable of managing her late son's estate. Furthermore, Ethan's actions demonstrate manipulation and intent to deceive. Therefore, the petition for control of the estate is denied. Gasps rippled through the room. My lawyer squeezed my shoulder, whispering, "We did it." But the judge wasn't done. He leaned forward, his gaze fixed on Ethan. "You are lucky your grandmother does not wish to pursue charges. Your behavior was deceitful, selfish, and unworthy of the trust she placed in you. Let this be your warning. Should you attempt anything like this again, the law will not be so merciful." Ethan's face went pale, his confidence completely shattered. I should have felt triumphant, but my heart ached. This was my grandson, the boy I had once rocked to sleep. Still, I knew justice had been served. My son's legacy was safe, and for the first time since his death, I felt like I had honored him properly. The house felt emptier than ever when I returned that evening. Ethan hadn't come home after court. His room was silent, the bed neatly made. For years, I had prayed to fill this home with warmth, laughter, and family. Now all I felt was the echo of betrayal. I wandered into my son's old study, the place where he used to balance his accounts, scribble notes, and dream of the future. His framed photo sat on the desk, smiling back at me. "I did it," I whispered. "I protected what you built." Tears slid down my cheeks. But along with grief, there was relief. I had stood firm, faced down the storm, and survived. Later that night, I received a text from Ethan. "I need time. Don't contact me." It hurt deeply, but I knew pushing him would only drive him further away. For now, I had to let him go. Word of the verdict spread quickly through the family. Some relatives called to congratulate me, praising my courage. Others stayed quiet, ashamed of how they had doubted me. One cousin said, "Margaret, you've shown us all what strength looks like. You didn't let grief or age stop you. You fought for what was right." But not everyone was supportive. A distant nephew sent a bitter message, accusing me of being selfish for not stepping aside. His words cut, but I reminded myself, greed blinds people, and not everyone can see truth when money is involved. Through it all, I realized something important. This battle had revealed the true colors of those around me. I knew who I could trust and who would turn away when tested. It was a painful lesson, but also a liberating one. Weeks later, a letter arrived in the mail. My hand shook as I recognized Ethan's handwriting. I hesitated before opening it, bracing myself. Inside, his words were raw and conflicted. "Grandma, I don't know why I did what I did. Maybe it was grief. Maybe it was greed. I thought I deserved Dad's estate, but I see now that I hurt you. I'm ashamed. I don't know how to fix this, but I'm sorry." Tears blurred my vision. For the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. He wasn't lost, not completely. Somewhere inside him, the boy I loved still existed. I wrote back simply, "Ethan, I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It means you must learn from it. When you're ready, my door is open. It was all I could offer. The rest would be up to him. As months passed, life slowly settled. I met with financial advisors, secured the estate, and created a trust in my son's name. Part of it was designated for education grants, something my son always wanted. For the first time, I felt peace. The estate wasn't just money, it was a legacy of hard work, sacrifice, and love. And now, it would continue to do good, long after both my son and I were gone. Neighbors and friends often asked, "How did you manage to stay so strong?" I always answered the same, because love is stronger than greed, and because I refused to let my son's memory be tarnished. One evening, as I watered the garden, I heard footsteps. Turning, I saw Ethan standing at the gate. His face was thinner, his eyes weary, but he looked different, softer, humbled. "Grandma," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I set down the watering can, my heart both hopeful and cautious. "Of course, Ethan." He stepped inside, hands trembling. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I don't want to lose you too. You're all I have left." In that moment, I realized something. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about family, about love, about healing. I opened my arms, and for the first time in months, we embraced. Time doesn't erase wounds, but it does help them scar over. Ethan and I still had a long road ahead, but we were talking again. Slowly, trust was being rebuilt. One evening, I sat on the porch, watching the sunset, the estate papers safely locked away. I whispered to the fading sky, "We made it, son. We protected what mattered. Life had tested me with the deepest grief, betrayal, and battles I never asked for. But through it all, I discovered a strength I didn't know I had. Ethan thought one video would change it all in his favor. But instead, it saved me, and maybe, just maybe, saved him too. Because in the end, the estate wasn't just about wealth. It was about love, legacy, and the unbreakable will to protect what truly matters.